Poor mother saves a rich man from death, and her life turns upside down. She pulled him away from a speeding car without thinking twice. Days later, the rumors started. They said she was trying to take advantage of him. She lost her job, was threatened. They almost took custody of her son, but no one expected what the millionaire would do for her. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The midday heat made the asphalt shine like broken glass. Sarah walked down Fifth Avenue carrying her worn bag and a plastic sack with 3 bread rolls she had bought with her last coins of the day. Her worn-out sneakers left small damp marks on the hot ground, but she didn't care. She had bigger worries weighing on her shoulders. 28 years of life, 15 of them taking care of her son Tyler alone. Since he was born, Sarah had learned to calculate every penny, every gesture, every word. She worked as a cleaning lady in 3 different houses during the week and sold homemade fudge in the neighborhood park on weekends. Money was always tight, but food never lacked on the table nor love in her son's heart. That morning, Tyler had woken up with a fever. Sarah had to miss work to take him to the clinic and was now returning home with medicine and bread for lunch. Her thoughts were completely focused on her son when she arrived at the intersection of Madison Street. The traffic light was red for pedestrians, but Sarah saw that no cars were coming. She was about to cross when she noticed an elegant man beside her, looking at his phone, completely distracted. He wore an impeccable grey suit and shoes that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. Suddenly, the sound of skidding tires cut through the air. A black car speeding toward them showed no signs of stopping at the red light. The man continued looking at his phone screen, unaware of the approaching danger. Sarah didn't think twice. She dropped the bag with the bread and threw herself against the man, pushing him with all her strength away from the crosswalk. They rolled on the ground, him on top of her, while the car passed like a rocket just inches from where they had been seconds before. The world seemed to stop for a moment. Sarah felt the weight of his body on hers, the smell of expensive cologne mixed with the dust from the sidewalk. Her heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. When she finally managed to move, she gently pushed him to sit up. "Are you okay, sir?" she asked, looking at him with genuine concern. Richard Blackwell slowly raised his head, still trying to understand what had happened. His dark eyes met hers, and for a moment, he was speechless. The woman before him had brown hair tied in a simple ponytail, a face without makeup, but with delicate features, and eyes that conveyed a kindness he hadn't seen in a long time. Yes, I'm fine," he managed to answer, running his hand across his forehead. "You saved me. If it weren't for you, His voice faltered as he thought about what could have happened. Sarah quickly stood up, brushing the dust from her stained blouse. She looked at the torn bag and the bread scattered on the ground. $3 wasted. She sighed and began picking up the pieces, trying to salvage what she could. "No need to thank me," she said without looking at him. "Anyone would have done the same thing." Richard stood up too, watching her carefully collect the bread as if they were precious treasures. He noticed her hands were trembling slightly and that there was a small cut on her knee, probably from the fall. "At least let me pay for the bread," he insisted, taking his wallet from his pocket. "And your clothes got dirty because of me." Sarah finally looked at him, noticing for the first time the details that revealed his social status. The gold watch on his wrist, the perfect haircut, the erect posture of someone used to being obeyed. She knew this type of person well. They were clients in the houses where she worked, people who saw her as part of the furniture. "I don't want your money," she replied, finishing collecting the last pieces of bread. "I just did what was right." She began to walk away, but Richard took a few steps after her. A small crowd had formed around them, people commenting about the accident that almost happened, some taking photos with their phones. "Wait, please," he called. "At least tell me your name." Sarah stopped and turned around. There was something in his voice that made her hesitate. It wasn't the arrogance she was accustomed to hearing, but a genuine vulnerability. "Sarah," she answered simply. "Sarah," he repeated, as if engraving the name in his memory. "I'm Richard. Richard Blackwell. The surname meant nothing to her, but Richard noticed some people around them whispering and pointing in their direction. He knew that in a few minutes that scene would be on social media and in the newspapers. Businessman Richard Blackwell, heir to the Blackwell Group, almost run, over on Fifth Avenue. "Thank you, Sarah. Seriously, you saved my life." She nodded briefly and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of pedestrians on the avenue. Richard stood in the same spot for a few minutes, looking in the direction she had gone, feeling a strange sensation in his chest. When she arrived home, Sarah found Tyler sleeping on the couch in the small living room. She placed her hand on his forehead and sighed with relief when she realized his fever had gone down. She looked at her own dirty and torn clothes, then at the pieces of bread she had managed to save. It wouldn't be the lunch she had planned, but it would be enough to make soup. While preparing the food, she couldn't get the dark eyes of the man she had saved out of her head. There was something about him that intrigued her, a sadness hidden behind his elegance, but she shook her head, pushing those thoughts away. People like him and people like her lived in completely different worlds. That encounter had been just a coincidence, one that would never happen again. On the other side of the city, Richard was in his penthouse apartment, looking through the panoramic window at the same Fifth Avenue where he had almost lost his life. He couldn't stop thinking about the woman who had saved him. There was something about Sarah that deeply touched him, an authenticity he hadn't found in his social circle for a long time. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. "Michael, I need you to find out everything about a woman named Sarah. She was on Fifth Avenue today around noon." "Of course, Mr. Blackwell. May I ask why?" Richard hesitated. How could he explain that a complete stranger had awakened something in him that he didn't know still existed? "She saved me today, and I need to thank her properly." 3 days passed since the accident, and Richard couldn't concentrate on anything else. During family business meetings, his mind wandered to Sarah's sincere eyes. During business dinners, he unconsciously looked for her face among the waiters and staff. His assistant's report had been disappointing. There were hundreds of Sarahs in the city, and without a last name or address, finding her would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. That Thursday morning, Richard made a decision that surprised even himself. He cancelled all his meetings for the day and went out driving aimlessly through the streets of New York. He didn't have a specific plan, just an inexplicable need to find the woman who had saved him. Sarah, meanwhile, had returned to her usual routine. Thursday was the day to clean Mrs. Peterson's house, a widow who lived on the Upper East Side. It was one of the jobs she liked best, not only because it paid better, but because Mrs. Peterson treated her with respect and kindness. "Sarah, dear, you're different today," the elderly woman commented as she had her morning tea in the kitchen. "Did something happen?" Sarah stopped wiping the counter and smiled. Mrs. Peterson had this gift of knowing when something was bothering her. "It's nothing serious, Mrs. Peterson. It's just that something strange happened a few days ago." The lady raised her eyebrows with interest. "Tell me everything." Sarah recounted the accident on Fifth Avenue, omitting only the strange feeling she had when she remembered Richard's eyes. Mrs. Peterson listened attentively, nodding in approval. "You did the right thing, my child. But tell me something, what was this man like?" "Elegant, rich, certainly. He wore expensive clothes and had that manner of someone who's in charge." Sarah paused. "But there was something different about him. I can't explain it." "Ah, Sarah," sighed Mrs. Peterson, "you have a very pure heart. Be careful not to get hurt." Meanwhile, Richard was driving through the streets of the central region when he decided to stop at a traffic light near Fifth Avenue. That's when he saw her. Sarah was crossing the street, carrying a grocery bag and walking hurriedly. His heart raced. Without thinking twice, he parked the car anywhere and ran after her. Sarah had entered a pharmacy and Richard waited outside, trying to control his nerves. When she came out, she almost bumped into him. "Sarah," he said, a little breathless. She recognized him immediately, and her face filled with surprise. "Richard, what are you doing here?" "I was looking for you." "Looking for me?" Sarah frowned. "Why?" Richard realized how strange his answer sounded. How could he explain that in the last few days she had occupied all his thoughts? "I wanted to thank you again and make sure you were okay. You got hurt when you pushed me." Sarah looked at the small cut on her knee that was almost healed. "I'm fine, it was nothing." An awkward silence settled between them. Richard didn't know how to continue the conversation, and Sarah seemed anxious to leave. "May I invite you for coffee?" he asked impulsively. Sarah looked at him suspiciously. "Why?" "Because—" Richard paused to think. "Why indeed?" "Because I'd like to get to know you better. You saved my life, Sarah. That means something to me." Sarah shook her head. "Look, Richard, I don't know what kind of person you think I am, but—" "What kind of person do I think you are?" he interrupted, genuinely confused. "You're rich. I'm poor. You wear suits, I clean houses to survive. We're from different worlds." Her voice had a tone of weariness, as if she had already lived through this situation before. "I don't know what you're thinking, but I'm not the type of woman men like you get involved with, at least not publicly." Richard felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "You think I'm looking for you out of self-interest? What kind of interest would that be?" "I don't know," Sarah shrugged, "but I know that people like you don't look for people like me without a reason." "The reason is simple," he said, taking a step forward. "You intrigue me. In 5 minutes of conversation, you were more honest with me than anyone in my social circle has been in years." Sarah studied him for a moment, trying to decipher his intentions. There was sincerity in his voice, but she had learned to distrust the sincerity of the rich. "1 coffee," she repeated. "Just 1 coffee." Richard smiled, and Sarah noticed how that smile completely transformed his face. Just 1 coffee. They entered a simple diner nearby. Richard felt out of place in the casual environment, but Sarah seemed completely at ease. They ordered 2 coffees and sat at a small table near the window. "Tell me about yourself," Richard asked. "There's not much to tell. I work, take care of my son, work some more." Sarah stirred the sugar in her coffee with automatic movements. "And you? What do you do in life besides almost getting run over?" Richard laughed. "I run a company. I inherited it from my father." "What kind of company?" "Construction, buildings, shopping malls, that sort of thing." Sarah nodded. She knew the type of company well. She had cleaned similar offices. It must be interesting to be in charge of so many people. "Actually, it's quite lonely," he admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. "You mentioned a son." Sarah's face immediately lit up. "Tyler, he's 15. He's a good boy, smart, studies a lot." "And his father?" Sarah's expression closed. "He's not part of our lives." Richard realized he had touched on a sensitive subject and changed the topic. They talked for almost an hour, and he discovered that Sarah had a subtle humor, a natural intelligence, and a perspective on life that fascinated him. She, in turn, was surprised to discover that Richard wasn't the arrogant man she had imagined. There was a melancholy in him, a loneliness that she recognized. When they said goodbye, Richard asked for her phone number. Sarah hesitated, but ended up giving it. On her way home, she wondered if she had done the right thing. That night, Richard called. "Sarah, it's me, Richard." "Hi," her voice sounded cautious. "I'd like to see you again. Maybe dinner somewhere." Sarah was silent for so long that Richard thought she had hung up. "Richard, I don't have clothes for the places where you must eat." "Then let's go somewhere where you feel comfortable." More silence. "Please, Sarah. Just 1 dinner." "All right." She finally gave in. "But it has to be a simple place." After she hung up, Sarah stared at the phone, wondering what she was getting herself into. On the other side of the city, Richard smiled alone in his empty apartment, feeling a happiness he hadn't experienced in years. Dinner happened at a pizzeria in Sarah's neighborhood. Richard arrived driving a simple car he had borrowed from his driver, trying not to attract attention. Sarah was waiting for him at the door, wearing a simple blue dress that enhanced her eyes. She had spent 2 hours getting ready, trying on all the clothes she had until deciding on that one. During dinner, the conversation flowed naturally. Richard discovered that Sarah had dreamed of being a teacher, but had to drop out of college when she got pregnant. She talked about the difficulties of raising a child alone, but without self-pity, with a strength he admired. Sarah, in turn, was surprised to learn that Richard felt like a prisoner of a life that others envied. "Have you ever wanted to drop everything and start over?" she asked, biting into a piece of pizza. "Every day," he admitted. "But it's not that simple. There are employees who depend on the company, commitments, expectations, and your dreams. What did you want to be as a child?" Richard smiled sadly. "I wanted to be a veterinarian. I loved animals, but my father had other plans for me." "And you never tried?" "I did. I even applied to veterinary school, but—" He shook his head. "My father had a heart attack at the time. He said the disappointment of seeing me waste my life was killing him." Sarah held his hand across the table, an instinctive gesture of comfort. "I'm sorry." Her touch gave him goosebumps. How long had it been since he had felt a genuine connection with someone? In the days that followed, they began to meet regularly, always in discreet places, away from the spotlight that followed Richard. He met Tyler, a shy but intelligent teenager who impressed him with his knowledge of astronomy. Sarah was touched to see how Richard treated her son with respect and genuine interest. But as the meetings became more frequent, complications began to arise. Victoria Sanders, Richard's ex-fiancée and the daughter of an important real estate businessman, learned of the meetings through gossip in their social circle. Richard had broken off the engagement 6 months earlier, claiming he didn't love her, and she had never accepted the separation. Victoria hired a private detective to follow Richard and photograph his meetings with Sarah. The photos soon reached the gossip magazines. "Millionaire heir involved with cleaning lady." The headlines were cruel and prejudiced. Sarah discovered the photos when a co-worker showed her the magazine during lunch break. She felt a mixture of humiliation and anger as she read the speculations about her intentions. They called her a gold digger, opportunist, fortune hunter. That night, when Richard called to invite her to dinner, she coldly refused. "Sarah, did something happen? Did you see the magazines?" Richard sighed. He had also seen them and was trying to find a way to protect her from it. "Don't give importance to that nonsense, they're just gossip." "Gossip that's destroying my reputation," she retorted. "Today, one of my employers dismissed me. She said she didn't want that kind of scandal in her house." Richard felt his blood boil. "What kind of person is that? I'll talk to her, "No," Sarah interrupted him. "You don't understand, Richard. For you, this might be just passing gossip. For me, it's my life. I need my job. My son needs me." "Then let's leave here. Go somewhere else where nobody knows us." "Run away?" Sarah shook her head. "I can't run. This is my life, my place. And you? Would you abandon your company, your family, everything for a woman you met a few weeks ago?" Richard fell silent, knowing she was right. How could he ask her to give up everything when he himself didn't have the courage to do the same? "I think we'd better stop here," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "It was good to meet you, Richard. Really." "Sarah, don't—" But she had already hung up. The following days were torturous for both of them. Richard immersed himself in work, trying to forget, but everything reminded him of her. Sarah returned to her routine, but felt a void she couldn't fill. It was then that the situation worsened. Tyler began to suffer bullying at school. His classmates had seen the magazines and made cruel jokes about his mother. The teenager came home with a split lip after a fight. "Mom, why are they saying these things about you?" he asked, trying to hide his tears. Sarah sat beside her son and hugged him. How could she explain that the world could be cruel to those who dared to dream beyond their condition? "People sometimes don't understand when someone tries to be happy in a way different from what they expect," she said, stroking his hair. "But that doesn't mean you have to put up with violence. If someone hurts you again, you tell the principal. Understand?" Tyler nodded, but Sarah saw in his eyes the same pain she felt. That night she made a decision. The next day she would seek out Richard one last time. Richard was in his office when Sarah appeared at the company's reception. The secretary, knowing the gossip, tried to stop her, but Richard ordered that she be allowed up. "Sarah," he said, standing up from his chair. She looked tired, worn out. "I came to say goodbye," she announced. "I'm moving to a small town. I found a job in a place where nobody knows us." "No," Richard shook his head. "You can't do that. Not because of me." "It's not just because of you, it's for my son. He's suffering at school, Richard, and I can't allow that." "Then let's fight together. Let's face these people." Sarah smiled sadly. "You still don't understand, do you? This will never stop. There will always be someone to remind me that I don't belong in your world, and in the end you'll get tired of having to defend me." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" Sarah looked at him. "Then why haven't you publicly acknowledged our relationship? Why were all our meetings hidden?" Richard opened his mouth to respond, but couldn't find a justification that didn't sound like an excuse. "That's exactly what I thought," said Sarah. "You're ashamed of me." "I'm not ashamed of you," he exploded. "I was protecting you." "Protecting me or protecting yourself?" Sarah's words echoed in the empty room. Richard knew she was right, and the truth hurt more than he had imagined possible. Sarah headed for the door but stopped before leaving. "Thank you for showing me that I'm capable of more than I thought, even if it didn't last long." And then she was gone, leaving Richard alone with the weight of his choices. 2 weeks passed since Sarah had left his life. Richard tried to convince himself that he had done the right thing by letting her go, that it was better for both of them. But the truth was that he felt empty, as if an essential part of himself had disappeared along with her. It was during, say, a board meeting that his life changed definitively. Victoria was present, representing her family's interests in the business, and took advantage of a moment when they were alone to approach him. "Richard, dear, see how it was better this way," she said with a smile that tried to be affectionate. "That woman would only bring problems. Imagine the scandal if you had continued." Richard looked at her with a coldness she had never seen before. "What are you talking about, Victoria?" "Why, the photographs, of course." "I thought it was obvious they came from me." She laughed, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I couldn't let you get involved with a person of that social level. It would be embarrassing for all of us." The revelation hit Richard like lightning. "You hired someone to follow us." "Of course I did. And that wasn't all." Victoria seemed proud of her manipulation. "I also made sure that some of her employers knew about the affair. A cleaning lady involved with a businessman of our caliber? Unacceptable." Richard felt a wave of nausea and anger that he had never experienced. "You deliberately destroyed her life." "I saved your reputation," corrected Victoria. "We can still get back together, Richard. Forget this phase and let's rebuild our life together." "Get out," he said, with a dangerously calm voice. "Richard, don't be dramatic." "Get out," he shouted, making Victoria back away. "And never come near me again. You are the most despicable person I've ever met." Victoria left the room offended, but Richard didn't even notice. He ran to the elevator, desperate to get to his car. He needed to find Sarah before it was too late. When he arrived at her apartment, the door was open, and some strangers were carrying furniture. Her neighbor informed him that Sarah and her son had left that morning for a small town in upstate New York. Richard felt despair take over him. How could he find her in a town he didn't even know the name of? It was then that he remembered Mrs. Peterson, the employer Sarah liked most. Perhaps she knew where Sarah had gone. Mrs. Peterson received Richard with initial distrust, but when he told her about Victoria's manipulation and his true feelings for Sarah, the elderly lady was moved. "She went to Pineville," revealed Mrs. Peterson. "She got a job at an inn there, but listen carefully, young man. Sarah is a special woman. If you go after her, you'd better be prepared to really fight for her this time." Richard drove for 3 hours until he reached the small tourist town. He found the inn where Sarah worked, a charming building surrounded by gardens. He asked to speak with her, and the owner of the inn went to call her. Sarah appeared wearing a simple uniform, her hair tied back, her face showing surprise and fatigue. "Richard, how did you find me?" "Mrs. Peterson told me where you were." He approached, studying her face. "We need to talk." We have nothing to talk about. I've already said everything I had to say. But I haven't, and I found out something. You need to know. Sarah hesitated. It was clear that part of her wanted to send him away, but another part felt curious. 5 minutes, she finally said. Richard told her about Victoria's confession, about how she had orchestrated the entire smear campaign. Sarah listened in silence, emotions alternating on her face, surprise, anger, disappointment. "This doesn't change anything," she said when he finished. "You were still ashamed of me. You still hid me as if I were a dirty secret." "You're right," admitted Richard. "I was afraid of judgment, afraid of losing everything. But knowing that you were gone made me realize something. Without you, none of this has value." Sarah shook her head. "Pretty words, Richard. But words are easy." "Then, let me prove it with actions." Richard took his cell phone from his pocket and made a call, putting it on speakerphone. "City Gazette, this is Richard Blackwell. I want to schedule an exclusive interview." "Yes, about my personal life. For today, if possible." Sarah looked at him confused. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done from the beginning." 2 hours later, Richard was sitting in front of the cameras of the city's main newspaper, with Sarah by his side. She had tried to refuse, but he had insisted that he wanted to tell the complete story, and that included her. "Ladies and gentlemen," began Richard, looking directly at the camera, "I want to talk about the woman who saved my life and then saved my soul. Her name is Sarah. She works hard to support her son, and I am hopelessly in love with her." Sarah felt tears well up in her eyes. Richard continued, telling the whole story. The accident, how they met, the attacks she had suffered, his cowardice in not defending her publicly. "Sarah taught me that true love knows no social class, is not ashamed of its origins, and does not hide behind conveniences." His voice broke. "She taught me that being a real man means protecting who you love, even if it means losing everything else." When the interview ended, Sarah was openly crying. Richard knelt before her, right there in the studio in front of everyone. "Sarah, I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know I hurt you and let others hurt you, but if you'll allow me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that you chose the right man to love." "Richard," she whispered. "Marry me," he asked, "not because I'm rich or because you're poor, but because we're better together than apart." Sarah looked at the man kneeling before her, the same man she had saved that afternoon on Fifth Avenue. But now she understood that they had saved each other. "Get up, you fool," she said, pulling him up and kissing him. The interview aired the same day and had a huge impact. Some people criticized Richard for his choice, but many more were moved by the love story. Sarah received dozens of job offers, but decided to accept Richard's proposal to jointly manage a social project, a vocational school for low-income youth. Tyler, who had initially been suspicious of Richard's intentions, ended up gaining in him a true father. The teenager flourished under his stepfather's attention and affection, who encouraged him to pursue his dream of becoming an astronomer. 6 months later, Richard and Sarah married in a simple ceremony at the same church in the neighborhood, where she had grown up. Mrs. Peterson was the matron of honor, and Tyler walked his mother down the aisle. The party was held in the community hall with homemade food and American music. Among the guests were employees from Richard's company, Sarah's neighbors, and people from all corners of the city who had been touched by their story. Victoria didn't show up, of course, but her absence only made the party more cheerful. At the time for speeches, Richard took the microphone and looked at Sarah, beautiful in her simple wedding dress. "They say love moves mountains," he said, his voice emotional. "But I discovered that true love does something much more difficult. It moves us. It moves our pride, our prejudices, our fears. Sarah moved me from a place where I was lost to a place where I can finally be happy." Sarah went up to the stage and took the microphone from his hands. "Richard taught me that it doesn't matter where we're born or how much money we have. What matters is the size of our heart and our courage to love without fear." They kissed, under the emotional applause of all present, sealing not just a marriage but a new story, that of two people who proved that true love can overcome any barrier. Years later, when they told their story to their grandchildren, Richard and Sarah, always began the same way. It all started with an accident on Fifth Avenue. But they both knew it hadn't been an accident at all. It had been destiny placing two lost souls in each other's path so they could find each other and finally complete each other. The end. Dear listeners, we hope that Sarah and Richard's story has touched your hearts. It's a reminder that true love knows no social boundaries and that sometimes we need courage to fight for what really matters. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special selection of equally engaging stories. You can find them by clicking here. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like on the video. Every day we bring unique narratives that explore the complexity of human feelings and remind us that we all deserve to be loved. Don't miss our next content and tell us in the comments which part of the